Welcome to the episode 21 of Media Literacy Lecture Series. We have discussed various dimensions of media literacy and information literacy in the last many episodes. And today we are going to discuss about data literacy, data in our routine life from the media literacy's perspective. In our day-to-day life, routinely, either through news sources or through our informal personal level or family level or office level, we must be come across various numbers. Number in the sense, sometime news might be there today, particular region witnessed 6.7 Richter scale to measure the earthquakes, or maybe there may be a pollution level today saying there's a 345 AQI, in a northern region. Certain regions might be say that today's temperature may be 45 or maybe today's a 17 and precipitation may be this level, or economic growth may be 7.2 or projected population size and number of voters. So day in day out, every day, every discussion, we are handling the certain numbers. Each number, each context, it gives certain meaning. And in routine life, it might be easy to handle that. When we go to the public domain, when we have large kind of information resources, documents, news reports, monograph or any government policy papers, where numbers are given, and numbers, we have to contextualize it in a very appropriate manner. Statistics might be used in a positive manner, may be used in a twisted manner for certain vested interest. So we have to carefully decode the number, understand the number, and utilize it in our personal understanding. Media literacy says the same thing. Access the right information, understand it, and use the knowledge for informed decision. Same, and that principle is applicable to numbers. Earlier, we had a different understanding about the numbers. Now, with the internet and social media and algorithm, our interaction with the information system is not just numbers, it deals with the data. And there is a lot of difference between numbers and data. And data deals with your profile, my profile, our interest, our behavior. Everything is being collected in the name of data, collated, and algorithm works collating those data and creating a profile. And we are interacting with the media system or computer system, websites or apps. All the interaction is being measured, quantified, and that's being converted into data. Of course, data as numbers only, but different kinds of data. And data is collated about individual, collated in terms of group, and creating a profile. So this is handling, the algorithm is handling the big data. Billions of people are accessing online. Billions of people are interacting. Algorithm handles the numbers in the form of data and summarizing those data in favor of one individual or group. Accordingly, decisions are taken. So now, in a present scenario, we have a lot of interaction with numbers and data. How those numbers are playing a role in our routine life, how to handle that, how to decode that, how to utilize it for informed decisions. We are trying to understand the data literacy. We are trying to understand the data literacy from the media literacy's point of view as part of the episodes. We have many episodes we have covered about the basics of various dimensions of media literacy. And in continuation that, we are trying to understand the data. And in the contemporary media environment, and the entire environment is being datafied, and the ecosystem operates through omnipresent datafication, algorithmic infrastructure. Whether you like it or not, we are highly connected with the mobiles at least. Whether laptops, tabs or computers are available in every individuals or not, but mobile is very highly prevalent. Our interaction with the mobile in multiple reasons. Everything is being systematically survive. There is a surveillance is happening, monitoring is happening by various stakeholders, and they are everybody, every institutions, every services, they're trying to understand our behavior, and they're trying to understand our interest. They're trying to understand our focus area. Accordingly, content is being designed, and it's all automatically happening, where the algorithm and the AI is playing a major role, and the lot of models are being created. Automatic, as I mentioned earlier, the system deals with the billions of people, and they need a predictive modeling, and that helps them to personalize the system, and that's what influences the content production and distribution decisions. And if you go to the timeline based on interest, if whatever content you are watching, and further days, further interaction with the same interface, you might be seeing or noticing a similar content. And but that's how the system works, and data increasingly determines the visibility of credibility and authority within the digital public spheres. And in this context, its requirement is understanding underlying data structure and computational decision-making process. That matters a lot in the present day scenario. All this automatic content distribution and decision-making, influencing individuals, all handled by algorithms. Algorithm is nothing but it's a system that connects the data through certain models, through certain predictions, and comes to a certain conclusion. So we are giving a data, based on the data, algorithm thinks about us and creating a decision about us. So this is the environment in which we are living, and this is a very much pertinent present contemporary scenario, a necessity for the people who are active in the online media information system to understand the nuances of data structure, nuances of how it's being played out for decision making. So that is a very crucial point. And as I mentioned earlier, we have dealing with a lot of numbers in our routine life, and with the current scenario, we are indirectly quantified through data by the algorithm or AI. That so earlier generation, before internet or after internet, present algorithm structure, before that we can classify that data it was understood by numbers in the earlier generation, couple of decades back, and many discussions happens with the statistical literacy, understanding numbers, applying those interpretation of numbers only. But now the statistical literacy is being converted into digital data literacy, and that is because of the scenario, and from numerical reasoning ability to an algorithm-based data structure. That's a transition happened, and that's why this data literacy become a demanding position and needs substantial understanding from the every quarter, every stakeholders. And in the contemporary scenario, the media framework extend beyond the statistics, understanding related to numbers, towards life cycle management and algorithmic awareness. We have taken a couple of sessions on artificial intelligence and algorithm. Probably you can go back to that episodes to understand what is actually algorithm literacy and AI literacy. Both the topic we were discussing from the media literacy perspective, and data literacy is continuation of that part. Data literacy in the present day context, it includes creation, storage, analysis, interpretation, and responsible dissemination of practices. Of course, the media content, information content, that needs to be distributed very responsibly, but that's connected with the data. And you might have heard about the viral content based on the media characteristics. What kind of content we are generating there? It's very appealing, emotional, creative, attractive. Then automatically algorithm notices that it's promoting those content across the platform, and that's become a viral over the period of time. And nobody's doing that. It's not done by any particular human beings, a group of human beings. The system understands that. It has been programmed like that. Anything content that's emotional and creative and evokes a lot of responses and appealing, then automatically it attracts the attention and it's being promoted. It's being placed in the different timelines. That's being done by the algorithm based on the data collected by the system from the content about the interaction, and accordingly it's predicting and promoting the content. That's how the media system works that. And this expansion from statistical to data understanding, it's a reflection of society's growing dependence on digital data structure. And that's true, and large level of interactions, our services utilization and application of apps or government services or private utilization services highly linked with the mobiles and the online services. So that is indirectly deal with the data in order to control the system, in order to predict the services utilizing, how far it's being utilized or not. All this based on basically the statistics, or any system wanted to understand the process in a large scale, then we'll go by the numbers only. We'll go by the data. And that helps us to quantify the behavior. Quantification is done by the numbers and data, and that deals with the statistical literacy earlier. Now it's the data literacy in the present day context. And but data literacy is a new phenomena, and but it's being studied and deeply interpreted by different set of disciplines, from education to information science to computing disciplines. Of course, from the media and communication and media literacy perspective. So a lot of disciplines approaching data from different level. Economics approaches data in different level, and education approaches in different level. And from media literacy perspective, we approach the data in different level. And unfortunately, there is no consensus. There is no uniformity of definition of data literacy. And there is a different level of framework, and certain disciplines approaches data literacy as a technical skills, and some influences about civic empowerment, some emphasis on inquiry cycle, like for example information sciences. So different disciplines looks at data literacy from their respective parent platform. So accordingly, there is a huge variation of definitions, huge variation of its understanding, huge variation of its applications in its ramification in the social stakeholders. So that is the current scenario. There is a huge terminological variations, and that creates a confusion, as well as it prevents the institutional policy or curriculum development on this matter. And before internet era, we had a good clarity about statistics. We had a good clarity about numbers. Of course, that is being used by many disciplines, but there is a uniformity on that. And there are many media systems, media curriculum, national and international level. They had a very clear-cut curriculum on understanding numbers. But now the data become dominant discourse, and there's a lot of diversity in terms of understanding the data literacy's applications, and that's creating much more confusion. Of course, that leads to better understanding over the period of diversity and some point of time, and they might agree to certain understanding of commonality. It might help to expand the understanding numbers to understanding the data literacy. That's the current scenario part that. But even otherwise also we can have the kind of common understanding about the concept called data literacy. There are 3 dimensions to the data literacy. One, the first orientation talks about data literacy as a skill, and it's predominantly discussed in terms of retrieving data and converting that data into information and using those information for decision making. So predominantly that is what prevailing in the current discourse of discussions in academic circle as well as in appropriate platforms. But there are other orientations. The first one is the information literacy point of view, collecting those, accessing right data and acquiring those data and converting into information and using those information for decision making. The second orientation talks about within the field of research data services and how that can be used in measuring the large level of data, measuring the large number of group and predicting certain future trends, either the market research or in the public opinion polls or in other similar fields. The third orientation about data literacy talks about how entire data life cycle, how it's generated, how it's being originated, how it's being processed, how it's being presented. Data mining, text mining, and that's one of the fundamental activities that's being nowadays converted to algorithm and AI. So this is another stream, very dominant, and which is that's what controlling the major online platforms. So that's one level, very dominant level, economically very sound and controlling many stakeholders. So three set of orientation, quite popular. There are maybe many, but as of now here in the presentation we are highlighting three. One, from the information point of view, data, information and understanding. And data is being used from research point of view to understand the large data or large level of group. And the third is data life cycle itself. So these are the three orientation, and that helps to understand data literacy. Of course, you can see that three comes from three different perspectives, three disciplines. So that variation you can easily notice that. And when we go to the data literacy specifically, you have to understand the two things. Numbers, that's an older concept. Now we are very stick to the data only. Data is different, information is different. And raw data, that doesn't automatically convey any meaning. And you have the kind of surveys being conducted after the polling. We are getting the numbers from different constituencies and parliament elections. 30,000, 40,000 people are asked about 10, 15 questions. And 40,000 into 15 questions, see that number of data is being collected. If you look at that numbers in Excel sheet, you may not be able to understand anything there. But we need appropriate tools to interpret those data, summarize those data, count those data, and probably apply those certain statistical tools to generate certain inferences. So that's how the statistics is being used. There is a two spectrum of data literacy. One is the raw data that's being generated from the human beings, and that doesn't give any meaning directly. We can't observe any pattern or prediction or anything. And statistics uses statistical tools are being used to convert the data and generate a new meaning, new understanding. So understand that information derived from data using appropriate tools, and it through various analytical scientific validation, and that helps to do a kind of reasonable prediction or conclusion based on the information. Origin of documentation or data, metadata, critically, that determines the trustworthiness and how far it can be interpreted, and who's generating the data, and how it's being generated, how it's being stored and presented to the large sections of the people. That matters. That's what media literacy also we have always talks about, that who generate the content, media content, and why they're generating that particular, why they're publishing those content, and with what agenda they're doing that. Same, instead of media content, we are replaced with the data. Who's generating the data, and how it got generated, how is being presented, preserved, distributed, as it is with the manipulation or something like that. So these are certain concerns, and media narratives often obscure the contextual limitations embedded within the data sets presented publicly. Limited understanding, there is a positivity, there is a negativity of handling those data. Data can be manipulated or modified or changed according to the need of who's controlling, who's generating, who's distributing the numbers, media content supported by the data. So these are certain concerns about the data and information. And data literacy is a recent concept. As we mentioned earlier, it was a statistical literacy earlier. Now with our online platform, we have talking a lot about data literacy, but it has a connection with the various other media literacies. And it intersects with the information literacy, it intersects with the digital literacy, highly connected with the statistical part, and it's computational, and it's, of course, we are looking at from media literacy. See the interconnectedness of data and how we can understand from multiple perspectives. And the numerical reasoning with the technological competency and critical communication, that is the core component of connecting those digital data literacy with the various literacies that. And we should have, may not be having a technical knowledge of collecting those data, but we should have a technical knowledge of how data is being collected, how it can be interpreted in a reasonably applicable tools, and generating critical understanding from the data. That's what the media literacy talks about that. And particularly the data literacy, the recent phenomena, focuses mainly on the life cycle management, how data is being generated, how it's being handled, how the algorithm playing a major role in transformation of the data, collecting the data, and based on the data, automatic prediction and modeling, and creating some conclusion about an event, process, individual. That is being a concern of recent phenomena. And with that, we can understand that digital literacy transacts from traditional media literacy to data-driven algorithmic environment. So this is the whole complex, holistic approach of data literacy. It's not functioning individually. In order to become more proficient with handling the data, and whether it's a sophisticated professional level or individual level, we need to have a little more additional knowledge about the data. For example, information literacy, talking about how to access the information, statistical literacy, and media literacy to handle those data. And particularly the data literacy starts with the basic concept of identifying an appropriate data source. It operates based on inquiry cycle. Inquiry basically, when we are in a situation, we have a problem, then we need to find a solution. In order to find the solution, and we need an adequate awareness about the problem. And the problem is being identified. In order to identify the solution, we need a supporting knowledge or information. And once we realize that, in order to solve the problem, this kind of information helps us to find the solution. Once we realize the need for information, then we have to approach the appropriate resources to collect those information or data, retrieve those data, and store it, process it, and convert it into information, new meaning, new understanding, and based on which we'll find a solution. So this is the starting point and the entire life cycle of data, how it's being generated, how it's being handled, how it's being delivered for a particular context. As an individual level, I'm talking about the individual level, and a data requirement related to the problematic context, and the data plays a role in generating new information, and that gives a new understanding. That helps us to find a solution. So this is a kind of a simplistic life cycle from the data literacy point of view, from the individual perspective. And that includes collection of data, analysis, interpretation, and decision making, following systematic methodological reasoning. And evaluation and reflection ensure accountability and continuous refinement for conclusions. So the data or information, as we mentioned in the earlier slide, Data is the one collected from various sources, but we need information for a solution. So data needs to be converted to information in order to find a solution. The core content, the core domain of data literacy is confined to that how far the conceptual understanding of data structure, how is being represented. That's very crucial part. The knowledge of storage system and data architecture supports the informed decisions. How to collect the data, how to store the data, how to handle those data. This is quite a requirement in a contemporary world, and of course little more technical skills are required to understand those phenomena. But here only that universities, colleges and schools are playing a major role in promoting data literacy. Basically it's about how to handle the data, how to store the data, how to process the data, knowledge structure, knowledge storage system and database structures, and numerical values, statistical tools to apply the data and convert the data into information and enhance your knowledge. This is the life cycle that needs to be introduced along with the ICT, along with the media literacy, along with the digital literacy. Data literacy also has become a major role in a present day context, and it needs to be promoted in at least from the educational intervention point of view. That and analytical reasoning, that is very crucial because that's what helps the data being converted into information. Statistical principles, modeling techniques, and predictive framework. Actually, these are the phenomena is being adopted by algorithm and AI to process the data, to predict something, to derive certain meaning, and creating a profile of an individual. And the same applicable to an individual level also, how we can collect the data, how we can handle those data, and arriving certain solution or knowledge. But all this process is very crucially in every media literacy perspective. You always that responsibility and ethical way of practice are very crucial. The data needs to be collected, processed, presented responsibly and ethically. So that makes sure that there won't be any subjective manipulations, there won't be any additional biasness attached with the interpretations, and data is being collected genuinely, processed systematically, and presented in a reasonably in ethical manner. So that is what requirement as part of the data literacy process. And the core process of data literacy revolves around data gathering that includes identifying relevant sources. That's the first pillar of media literacy, and ensuring the data quality, that makes sure that we have got the reliable access and reliable data, and cleaning and pre-preparation of ensures accuracy, cleaning the data and processing the data, and that makes that data is accurate and reliable and it's valid for analytical processing that. Then automatically with the appropriate tool we can summarize, we can visualize that, and that helps common people to understand the data in a very meaningful manner. And because of algorithmic situation and big data, that's how we are currently interacting with the big media, particularly digital media platforms. It's a very pertinent for us to understand the media, digital literacy, data literacy, and media literacy are interconnected in that way, because our informed decisions matters how far we are connecting with the media system. And now the digital and mobile influencing heavily, and all are pertinently connected with the data, and that's how we are directly concerned about the dominance of data, and that's directly linked with our knowledge and decision making process. It's very pertinent to understand data literacy. It's pertinent to promote data literacy, and it's a necessity to incorporate the basic understanding about data, handling those data, and deriving information in appropriate curriculum framework. So thanks for watching this episode.